Hi guys, welcome to UNE Law. It's wonderful, really wonderful to have you all here. Now, my name is Julia Day and I'm a senior lecturer here in the law school. And what do I do? Well, some may say not much, but what do I do in the law school? I teach tort law, primarily. Does anybody know what tort law is? No? Sorry?
Kind of an area of
Civil law. I'm very impressed because you had your legal studies exam this morning, so hopefully you blitzed it. So absolutely, so it's civil law. So it's not criminal law, which Paul might have been talking about as well. It's not criminal law, it's civil law, which is individual parties or groups of parties generally suing each other for damages. That's sort of the very, very, very general proposition, okay? So the main area of tort law, or the main tort, is something called negligence. Have you heard of the concept of negligence? That's the concept of owing somebody a duty of care, okay? So in your case, if you were to hurt yourself in here, for example, in this room, who do you think would owe you a duty of care and who would you bring an action against? The university. And the reason is because the university, and myself, the university is what's known as the occupier of these premises. So yes, you would bring an action against the university. So if I was negligent, for example, given the nature of my bank balance, I probably wouldn't suggest you sue me. You would go for the university because they've got insurance, etc. So torts is sort of the main thing I teach. I also teach medico-legal, so that's issues relating to medical law. We also go into issues such as abortion, organ transplantation, cloning, genetics, etc. And biotechnology, all sorts of different things we would go to in that kind of unit. The other unit that I'm coordinating at the moment is one called Work 300, and Work 300 is what that allows students to do is in their later years they do a placement, often in a law firm, and then they use that as assessment. So that's part of their degree. So it's not just sitting in front of a book reading, in the library being as boring as all hell. You actually can go out and do some really interesting stuff. And the other good thing about UNE is you've got such a variety of students, so you can learn a lot from a number of from people with a lot of different backgrounds. So how did I get here? Well, I'd like to say it was only 2 years ago that I finished my law degree, but it was probably about, dare I say it, probably 20. Is that really scary? Really scary? So I worked in legal practice for a while, but then I came out and decided to become an academic, which is quite funny because I don't think I really fit the mould of an academic. I've just started a new blog project, etc., and I'm calling it Academically Blonde. And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't fit in particularly well in the academic game, because I'm, pretty out there, like socialising, always going out, heaps of friends, and not just sitting in the library studying. So a bit different from others. So of course I did my law degree, I did a master's, and now I'm doing a PhD. My PhD is all related to social media. Everybody's using social media these days. I think the latest stats are about 72% of the world's population is on social media. The key things that's happening with social media and the law in particular is people think that they can put anything online. Would you agree with that? They think it's open slather. It's like having a brain fart, They got it, and I probably shouldn't say that, but they think, I can put that. That so-and-so over there's bloody annoying, they're annoying. I need to put on social media how annoying they are. Or I need to put on social media that this business has done this. Not a good idea, guys. Not a good idea at all. I think people don't understand the complexities of social media use and how it really can impact on your life. Does anybody here watch 60 Minutes? I don't normally watch it, but there was a defamation and school principal case. What had happened was, and I'm sure you can all relate to this, sometimes school principals aren't as popular as others, or in any entity aren't as popular as others. So this particular school principal, right, she had been suspended for some reason. They didn't really go into it in the case as to why she'd been suspended, but she'd been reinstated. In the meantime, I think it was the P&C president decided, okay, this lady needs support. She needs our support. This is not fair that she's been suspended. So he set up a Facebook page, right? In some of the parents' wisdom, Okay, so some of the students' parents, they decided, no, we don't like this woman, this principal. We need to say exactly what she's like on these social media pages, on this particular Facebook page that was created. And so they said things like, you know, she's, you know, evil and horrible, and she doesn't do the right thing by students who are lower socioeconomic. She's only interested in the really bright students that come from, you know, good families, etc., etc. So these were the sorts of themes that were coming out. Now, as you can imagine, the school principal actually took quite a bit of offence to this, right? So interestingly enough too, with that case, the majority of the comments that were actually put on the social media pages were actually very positive about her. And that actually went against her in the case, because there are a number of things that were talked about. First of all, not many people saw the posts, so it was only a fairly small page. So if you had a page with a lot of following, that's going to lead to more damages if you find defamation, for example. The other thing was that it was overwhelmingly positive about her, so that went against her as well, because what they termed as a reasonable reader would look at that and say, oh, that's only a few, so it's not really sort of degrading her reputation as such. But interestingly enough, she won, right? But I just want to get this point across. She technically won it was only, I think, the district court, and she won. But do you know what the damages were? $6,000 she ended up with. $6,000. Now, what do you think her legal fees were? $600,000. So it's a very hollow victory. As I said to you, there's a number of different legal issues when you're looking at social media law, okay? The key one, which I just referred to, would be defamation. So defaming somebody's character, saying that basically what defamation means is that you're reducing the estimation of that person to others, okay? So that's essentially what it means. So it's not like, you know, when David there was trying to hit me, it wasn't like that he was, you know, trying to bruise me or physically assault me. It's where it's all about reputation and reputational damage. So that's obviously one of the key things that's looked at in terms of social media law. But you've got a number of others. Privacy is going to be an issue as well, because, you know, there's things that people can't talk about and shouldn't talk about. And that's, of course, privacy, confidentiality. Intellectual property can be an issue as well. I run the law school social media pages, and I can tell you I'm very careful about the IP issues, so that's intellectual property. Bullying is a huge issue on social media. I mean, I remember when I was at school, the bullying happened in the classroom or around, you know. Now it's happening all day and night, isn't it? For something like torts, which is what I teach, normally there's no point bringing an action against a kid who's bullying you, right? Is there? Normally what you're looking for is money. So there's no point, you know, David saying to Dion, you've bullied me, I want $1 million. So there can potentially be actions against the school or others as well in those sorts of cases. When you've got people, let's say, administering social media pages, okay, they will potentially be, generally anyway, they will be covered by their employer, because, so for me, I run a lot of the social media pages. I'm obviously, given that I do defamation and torts, etc., I'm very careful about what I write, and I haven't had a problem. But if there was a problem, it would be the university who would be liable, unless I was really acting outside the scope of my employment. So there's that. Now, just a couple of other, because I know we're running out of time, a couple of other issues in terms of social media. There have been a number of cases lately about, number one, what is a publication and who is the publisher. So a recent case called Vola, what happened there, it was a news media site. They put up a news media story and then invited, because what do we want to achieve on social media usually? We want attention, don't we? We want likes, we want shares, we want comments. That's what administrators are looking for. So you had a media company, their Facebook page, and there were defamatory things put on in the comments of the social media page, okay, in their page. The question is who should be liable there? And who is the publisher? And interestingly enough, in that case, they found, and there's been other appeals and stuff on this, but this is just a general principle, they found that actually the news.com should be liable for those defamatory statements, because they, in that case, were termed as being a publisher. There's also been recent cases from Google. Now you can imagine if you're Mr. Google up there, what's the last thing you're going to want? you're not going to want to be a publisher of things, are you? Because, I mean, how many times do you guys do a Google search a day? I'd have to do at least 10 or 15 at the absolute minimum. So can you imagine, so everything I then download, Google is potentially, and that's what was said in a recent case, Google is actually the publisher and therefore can potentially be liable for defamation. So you can imagine that that's going to be a massive problem for search engines, etc. And I'm just trying to think, there have been lots and lots of other cases. There's a couple of things that have been talked about. First of all, you as individuals, okay, when you're on your social media pages, will you actually be liable for things you say, for comments you make? What about a share or a like? Does a like, you know, when you put a like on Facebook or, you know, Instagram or whatever, you put a like on there, are you endorsing something that somebody else has said? You see what I mean? Are you endorsing it? Are you saying, and therefore are you then a potential party to a defamation action? If you comment on something and you say something that's defamatory, you know, again, are you going to be liable? If you share, we all know there's ridiculous conspiracy theories and ridiculous things, fake news, all sorts of things that go viral on social media. We all know that, don't we? If you share those, are you going to be potentially liable as well? Just one last final point and then I'll finish up. What happens in law, right? We've got a number of legal principles, precedent. We probably all know about the doctrine of precedent. We look at other cases to determine, okay, well, how will this be addressed? Social media is pretty new. What was Facebook, 2008? Yeah, it launched in 2008 and it's becoming, you know, obviously really prolific now with a huge amount of issues involved with it. So what's happened is what judges try and do is they look at cases by analogy. So there's a big suite of media cases, for example, where they were looking at, you know, television, defamation, like, etc., etc. And whether or not, what they do is they look at those cases and then by analogy they try and work out how it should be looked at in terms of social media. But it's very much an evolving thing. There's no, you know, set rules, etc., etc. We have things like the Defamation Act, okay, which help. But in terms of social media law, it's a very, very evolving beast. But it's fascinating and it's interesting. One final point too, and this happened fairly early on, was one of the key issues as well in terms of the internet and social media was which jurisdiction or which set of laws should you look at to determine whether or not something's defamatory. Because you can imagine, and this is huge in terms of social media, isn't it, that you can, in the click of a finger, publish something and it can go all around the world, okay? Which jurisdiction would you be looking at in terms of governing or determining whether or not that post, for example, was defamatory? It's usually the one, and it's a very early on case, but it still seems to be good law, it's usually the one where it's downloaded. So you can imagine as a publisher that's a big issue, isn't it? Because it's not just where it's been written or been curated or been created, it's also where it's been downloaded. So it's going to be evolving, a very, very evolving area that I think you should, you know, really follow. But the key thing, you know, I always say to my students is you don't put anything on social media that you're not happy for everybody in the world to know. You know what I mean? You be careful. Because when you go and, of course, apply for jobs or you become a professional like me or, you know, whatever, your digital footprint is really important. You go for a job, what's a potential employer going to do? They're going to Google you. And if you've got stupid photos of yourself on Facebook, you know, swigging beers and doing, we won't go into, but things that you probably shouldn't, it could, you know, potentially create a problem. So, you know, just be careful. Be careful of that. But thank you guys. I really appreciate you coming today and we'll talk to you soon. Cheers.
Thank you.